Talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Well, first of all, this is not the first time I've been faced with a narcissist. Being an attorney, um, we have clients who are narcissists that we have to deal with, and that is an interesting experience. And each time I've dealt with that, I've had to go no contact with them in order to get rid of them. And then in my personal life, I didn't know what a narcissist was, and I fell victim to the normal cycle of a narcissist that I learned from you, Rebecca, and all your guests. And one of the things that struck me the most was when you interviewed medical people, and they talked about the chemicals that are released in your body when the narcissist captures you. And so I was the victim of a typical love bomb. And then after a couple months, I got the degrading part going. And then a month later, mini abandonment. And like most people, by the time we were done with the cycle, I was addicted chemically to my narcissist. And I didn't realize at the time that she had objectified, because of her condition, her internal condition, she objectified me. I took my image and took it inside her, but made it grandiose, so that when she got to really look at me, then she'd have some way to degrade me. But I found that I had very intense love bombing that, by the time we were done, we were engaged already. And it was, to me, it was the most powerful love I've ever felt in my life, something I'd never felt before. And I didn't realize it at the time, but because she had taken and objectified me, I was actually falling in love with myself. And it's very interesting to realize that after all this time.
They mirror you. They mirror you. They know how to do that.
Yeah. Because I always wonder, how could a person who is so different from me in age and ethnicity be so much like me? Now, how could they like the things I like, do the things that I do? It was like, a relationship made in heaven. And I couldn't do anything to fight it. It was like impossible. And then when the degrading came, I started, I did unconsciously, well, it was consciously, but it was hidden from me by my subconscious. I did what you recommend. You recommend to take a journal, to make a journal entry. And I did that. I didn't know that I had done that until after the arrest. And
Oh, he just throws that in there like,
well, I think we'll get there eventually, but I wrote down I have 55 days worth of notes over a 5-6 year period of what abuse I took. And when I read it, and excuse me if I get emotional about this, because it's very close to me, and it's close in time to me. I'm still in the middle of it. And when I read the notes, I can't believe it's me. And the abuse was so obvious and tragic, and the control. I can't believe I gave away my control. I wrote a book called Taking Control, and I gave it away to somebody else. And how can I do that? So when I saw those notes, I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I said, who is this person? Who am I? How could I let this go? But I couldn't help it. I was like a heroin addict. And I had always wondered about my friends in the music business who were heroin addicts and ended up committing suicide. And now I know, because, in the trauma bond at the end, you can really feel the narcotic effects of this. You are caught in a web like a prisoner. People would say to me, well, how was the pandemic for you? And I go, well, what pandemic? And they said, well, the lockdown and all that. I go, well, I've been in lockdown for 6 years. I don't know what difference it is really. And so I took the notes and I put them someplace and forgot about it. Absolutely forgot about it. Completely struck it from my mind. And I had no memory of ever writing any note. Yet when I read them, it flowed right back to me. And so the reason why I know about the chemical addiction is from watching you on the show, and all your YouTube videos were very instructive. You referred me to my attorneys, and I have been dealing with this and all of the consequences of it ever since. And there's so many things to talk about. What happened? But what exactly would you like to hear?
Well, why don't you talk about how you felt at the darkest hour?
No, at the darkest hours. I'm going to get a little emotional, but I found a note that I left in my phone a day after I had taken pictures of some knives that were threatened. And the note said, if I'm dead, I'm not suicidal. Investigate the person next to me on my bed. So I thought I was a dead man. And I still harbor that fear today. And, as a result, I have a protective order, which enables me to maintain no contact.
Mm.
It's a protective order. It's supposed to protect me. So, and I know my attorneys are knowledgeable in narcissism, and it's very important that when someone gets involved in a marital or other kind of relationship where they need a lawyer, that they actually pick someone who knows what a narcissist is, because no one will believe you. Because you do things that rational people don't do, and they think you're making it up. They don't understand that there is a group of people who didn't develop without being abused, and because of that abuse, they become a narcissist later in life. And it's what I never understood was what exactly was wrong with her, and could I help her? Could I fix her? And I tried everything I could. I talked to the elders at my church. I talked to the police. I talked to everyone I could to try and figure out how can I help. And then when I watched your YouTube videos, I realized, oh, it's not my fault that this happened to me, and there's no cure for her. So, gotta go no contact. And that's
So, and I think what you just said, you said something that was, I think, very distinctive and important. And I make that distinction in my new book too, so I want to make sure we highlight this. And that is that it's not just that the narcissist needs to be people need to understand the narcissist, people need to understand what the victim is going through as well, because you are also not in your right mind at that point. I mean, you've also experienced so much cognitive dissonance and so much, you know, they've used so many different tactics to destabilize you and to mentally abuse and emotionally abuse you. And if it's been over a period of time, you are in a state of such C-PTSD
Yeah.
that you come across sometimes the victims or the targets. I like to use target better because really it's more that you've been targeted. Come across sometimes as the crazy one. And I think sometimes judges don't understand that, mediators don't understand that, because, you know, the narcissist sits around looking calm, cool, and collected, while the targets look like they're all over the place. But part of that is because they've been subjected to this craziness for so long. Would you agree?
Yes, you just described the body cam videos. Um, I'm explaining the circumstances to my officer, and she's cool, calm, and collected, talking and persuading and winning over and love bombing the other officer. So believe me, they know what they're doing and they're good at it.
Right. And you know, part of it, of course, is that they've spent, you know, I often talk about how in Malcolm Gladwell's book, he talks about the 10,000 hours to achieve mastery. Well, I mean, 10,000 hours is like roughly 4 years or whatever it is. I mean, they've been working on this since childhood. So, I mean, 10,000 hours has been achieved by them years and years and years ago. I mean, and if you don't have the empathy factor, and so you're not worried about how people are feeling or anything else, it's no holds barred, right?
Yeah,
So,
you know, the hardest part is that, you know, I love her so much and I am hurt so much that someone that I love that much and trusted that much could harm me. You know, it's just, it's really a hard thing to accept. But you have to in order to go on.
well, you have to understand that you're not loving a person who is capable of loving you back, number one.
Mhm.
And number two, it's not really love, because it's really more of that, what you were talking about, that trauma bond, that addiction, that, you know, I talk about Robert Sapolsky's study, you know, where he did that study on monkeys. And, you know, for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this before, that, you know, these monkeys were given a reward, a treat, if they did something good. And if they got this treat every single time they did something good, then the dopamine levels in their brain were non-reactive. Everything was the same. But if they got a treat intermittently, such that they didn't know when they were going to be rewarded, then just the anticipation that they might get a treat caused the dopamine levels in their brain to rise to the level of cocaine. So that it's you actually become physiologically addicted to that narcissist because of that high and low, that love bomb, the ghosting, the hot, the cold, the, you know, and the highs are so high, you know, they love you more than you've ever been loved. And that, you know, the pedestal, the sweep you off your feet. And then the lows are so low. And that's that's what it is. So it's not a true love. And then the thing is, they also target people who have their own trauma, by the way. People who have had trauma in childhood, they're able to feel that core, that, who have their own core wounds, who need to love other people, who want to pour all that love into somebody else, who want to save people, who think that they can give their, that empath thing, and so they take all of that and, deplete you completely, and you're left feeling totally and utterly complete, depleted, and they're still starving for as much supply as possible. And it's an unending cycle. But they feel they target people who have that kind of core wound of, I need to save somebody, some people who have unhealed stuff inside of them as well.
Right. Well, my character flaw is that I'm a rescuer.
That's my point.
And I also didn't take drugs, so I would have no idea if my body was being taken over by something physiological, because I don't know what drugs feel like. I barely drank, and I really think that they have to make you a better person even than you were when they captured you, because they need more supply. And I think that there's a positive thing that happened to me because I was in a relationship. Despite all the abuse and all the things that I took, I actually grew to be a better person in every aspect, because I was pushed to be that way by the person who was captured me. And
Well,
then
hey, if you can have gratitude for it, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I think it's important that you learn from every experience, and that you turn every disappointment into an opportunity for better, and learn from the past. And that way, you're not going to repeat it if you learn from it. And those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. So I hope that nobody out there repeats what happened to me and what's happening to them. I think it probably would be seductive to people to want to repeat it, and to allow their narcissists to come back and take them over again. Because you really believe that there's no other person in the world that can make you feel like that. And it's a lie.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, but that is, what that trauma bond is all about. But if you can be grateful for it and start to see the signs for the future so that it doesn't happen again, then that's, definitely all the better for it.
Right.
So after being in that dark place, how did you start to turn yourself around?
Well, I probably would still be taking it if she hadn't taken the violence to the next level and hit me so hard in the face. And that kind of snapped me out of it right there. And at that point, I thought, wow, I'm really in danger. I better do something. And then I called the police. And as a result, I had a moment of clear thinking. And I watched her videos very carefully for 2 weeks. And during that time period, I discovered a lot about myself and a lot about her. And then I hired some attorneys that you recommended, and we've been dealing with the problems. And I have a victim's rights lawyer who is making sure that I'm treated like a victim and not as a criminal. And it's important through therapy. I have therapy. I found a great therapist in England who is urging me to be a strong person and to show everyone, including the narcissist, that I am not going to be captured anymore by anyone. And I am strong.
I love it. I love to hear that. I love to hear that.
I mean, there is life after narcissism, definitely. And, you know, you get a kind of a clue as to how good life can be. You just during the cycle, you just don't get to stay in it very long. You know, it could just happen at a flash like that. You've said it a lot of times on your podcast that boom, they just switch. You know, they're all of a sudden they go from being, you know, the most loving person to like a she-devil. And it's just, you can't understand it. You know, I would just walk away and I would, you know, I learned a long time ago not to confront people who are like that. And I just would leave and I would think, what is going on here? This is insane. Now, how could somebody switch from saying, you know, how do you feel that I love you so much, to you're a liar, you're a cheater, you're saying all these bad words to me, you're yelling and screaming at me, and you're thinking, wait, who's she talking about? That's not me. Now that's her. It's really interesting, you know. She called me, I looked at my notes, she must have called me a liar 10,000 times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Meanwhile, she's the liar, of course,
yeah, every
projecting.
time she said liar, she's actually just raising her hand saying, liar, liar.
Exactly.
Because, you know, I found out that a lot of stuff she told me was not true. And I'm not going to go into any details, but we really need to form relationships with people that you can trust.
Ah,
and
so
people
true.
people who have integrity. And you know, the narcissist does not have integrity, and you can't trust them. You know, it's just, and if you give away your trust to them, you can guarantee that they're going to use it against you.
As a lawyer, how do you feel about the SLAY program, and how do you think that that helps people?
Well, having subscribed to it myself, you know, I think that it has very helpful hints for people about how to put things together for their lawyers, so their lawyers understand what's going on. You know, most lawyers and judges, they don't know what a narcissist is. They think that you're the crazy one and not the other person. And you have to, you know, somehow get your lawyers on the right page by showing them things. Like I picked out all my notes and my emails and gave it to my lawyer, and my lawyer came back the next day broken, you know, saying, oh, I can't believe we got to get you out of this, you know, because they can recognize it when they see it, but when they hear it, they just don't get it, a lot of them. And they don't understand that they're dealing with someone who's not a normal person. You're dealing with a narcissist, someone who is only out to get what the narcissist wants. And so you have to figure out how to get from here to the end as fast as possible and safely as possible. And sometimes that requires you to put the case together yourself and hand it to your lawyers and say, this is what happened. Do you need to talk to my therapist? You know, do you need to hire an expert in narcissism to explain it to the court? What do you need to do to make them understand? You know, and the SLAY program program does that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, I mean, I know that it has helped you, and I'm so grateful that you've been able to break free. And so, how do you feel today? How are you feeling today?
Well, um, we can't be 100% 24/7. We just can't. Even a normal person, let alone a victim, or as you said, a target. You know, and so today, for example, I woke up and I was very melancholy, and I was thinking about coming on here and talking, and it's of course it's bringing up things for me, and I knew that I was going to leave the pain and the melancholy in the room where it was, and I was going to walk out and close the door behind me and leave it in the room. And that's how I got the strength to make it to this. That's how I got there. So my day went from being dark to being light. And you really appreciate the light when you've seen the dark. It's like if you really can't appreciate the dawn unless you are in the darkness first. Then all of a sudden this beautiful light comes out and you feel so warm and comfortable, and you forget about the darkness. And it's very important to do that. You can't dwell on that. You have to look forward. The people who make it through life after dealing with a narcissist are the ones that take all of the baggage that they carry on their back and work through it and get it off. Because if they don't, the doors that are open in front of them, they're not going to fit through. They're going to have too much baggage. And you need to do that. They have to get through it. And it's rough. It's very rough, because not only is it a mental and emotional addiction, it's a physical addiction. And the chemicals that go through your body, I suspect that if you exercise a lot, like I've gone and I've hired a trainer, someone who I trained with in the past, and I have started an exercise program that creates some of the chemicals that my body missed after I severed the relationship. And the cortisol from the bashing that I took, I don't want to see that. I don't want to recreate that. But so what I did was I did therapy, and I did what the therapist suggested, which was to be a powerful person, to go back to the person to who I was before I met her, and to just look at my inner child and be that person again, and be strong and not give up myself to anyone again in that way. And that's what I'm doing every day.
I love it. I love it. What would be the theme of your life today?
My theme of my life today would be the clouds parted.
Clouds are parting.
Yep.
I love
Clouds
it.
parted and the sun is coming out.
I love it. So any final words of wisdom for anybody who's listening who might be where you were?
Well, I would say that I was so attached by the trauma bond that every minute of the day I wanted to write or talk to my ex, and I knew I couldn't. So I wrote it down on papers, and then I threw them away instead of sending them to her. And my advice is to people that if you get the urge to contact the person who's hurt you, write it down if you have. Look at it, read it, accept it, and then tear it up and throw it away. That's what you got to do to stay mentally focused. because you're being torn apart every day, and you have to put yourself back together by realizing that in the morning you're going to feel one way, and by noon you will have worked your way out of it, and everything's going to be okay. It is, as long as you don't make contact. That's the other rule you have. No contact. No contact means no contact. I don't know why people don't get that. It's the other person is dead. You can't contact them. You can't watch them on their Facebook. You can't watch them on social media. You can't follow them. You can't look at them. They're dead. That's the way you have to look at it. And if you really can make yourself do that, then you'll be fine.
And then you got divorced at
Did.
some point along the way. Yeah.
I did let's see, we got divorced in 2015, but I got separated in 2013 during my awakening moment of realizing that the life that I had created wasn't actually the life I wanted to live, which was pretty interesting when you have that awakening moment. I was on a yoga mat actually, and I'd done yoga probably like 3 times. I just finishing a bodybuilding competition, and a girlfriend of mine was having she was being filmed on TV because for yoga, because she was in the competition with me. And I remember being on that mat and having this massive breakthrough. I was in the what was it called? The frog pose. And I was just crying, and all this emotions were released from my hips. One of the things that I realized after decades of having unhealed trauma is that I had so much locked in me that wasn't processed of emotions. Because when you grow up with a narcissist, or you grow up in a very toxic environment, you are not taught to feel your emotions. You are taught to freeze those emotions, and big girls don't cry, and you just kind of pick up and go along. And that's kind of what I did until that moment in my life where it was like this dam just like went, and it was like, okay, all right, I can't unsee and unfeel what just happened. Like something in my life has to change. It was in that moment my girlfriend was talking, and she's like, are you really happy? And I'm like, I forgot who Shamina was. I was in such survival mode for so many years. And I'm sure many people can relate to that, where you're just like, you just get up and you just keep going, wake up, do the same thing over and over again. And I'm a high achiever. So being busy and accomplishing things were my go-to drug of how I survived. Right. Until that moment. And there was no turning back. I realized like, okay, things have to change. And a month later, my now ex-husband, we decided he would move out. And I just spent the last 10 years on a journey of really finding who I was, breaking my patterns and healing. And it's been amazing.
Yeah. But you still continue to practice law after that.
I did for a little bit. And then I realized like I had a calling. On that mat that day, something came to me and said, you were here for something bigger. I just didn't know what. And, it's really scary because you have this, profession that you've been in for years that is guaranteed money coming in, and, it takes care of my family. And then, all the investment made into becoming a lawyer, it's not a cheap endeavor, to
Yeah,
do that. And also it's a highly widely respected profession. And I knew there
it
was
is.
something else calling to me, and I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew I couldn't ignore that calling.
And you do
And
well as an attorney. I used to hear people call it the golden handcuffs. Like you can't actually just leave it very easily.
no,
Right?
it wasn't. And, I think it was like almost like serendipitous because the market was crashing, and, a lot of things were going, and where people were trying to bounce back again. Things were changing in real estate, and my kids were 4 and 5 at the time. And my ex-husband was working a lot. So I had really scaled back on my practice, but I was afraid to let everything go because what if I did? What would happen? And there came a point where I just jumped, and I'm like, okay, I have to really figure out what this is. And I spent years working on myself, and I would take deals here and there, but I wasn't fully disconnected until eventually in 2008, I'm like, okay, I can't do both right now. It felt misaligned. And so then I decided, okay, 2019, this is it. I took some deals on, and then 2020, my business completely blew up, and it was amazing. We made 7 figures right away. It was amazing how I thought everybody did. So when I came on, it worked really well.
So
Having
during
done that,
COVID, this is during COVID.
yeah, during COVID. And, and at that moment, I was like, I'm so glad I'm not practicing law right now, because where would I be going? Like Zoom rooms. I mean, r- people were, and I was a real estate attorney on top of that. Like the real estate industry had shut down. Lawyers weren't really practicing in that moment. And I feel like I feel spiritually I was aligned and I was set up for this new work that was coming my way. I just had to say yes and listen and trust the intuition and the voice that I couldn't really pinpoint. And being a lawyer, I'm so like, I still like this where I'm evidence based and I look for facts. I look for things to make sense. And the stuff that was happening to me didn't make any sense. So I had to go deep and trust something inside of me that I didn't maybe always trust before. And when I started doing that healing work, I started getting really connected to that feminine energy inside of me. And I really started connecting to, my spiritual self and just really trusting my soul, like this is the right thing to do. Even though there was no evidence to say, go ahead and do it. I had to keep trusting. And man, talk about faith. That was like a huge, huge jump in faith.
Mm. Yeah. Well, it was during COVID that I made my jump onto YouTube and did all my stuff too. I
Right.
mean, there were times that they were those times that you had to make decisions, you had to make changes, right? When you are dealing with a covert narcissist, you should run quietly. You're dealing with a counterfeit relationship. I know it is a nightmare. I have been exactly where you are. I know that I still remember that pit in my stomach, that tightness in my chest, that half nauseous feeling, that feeling like you want air. You feel like you can't breathe, that rumination in your mind all the time. I know exactly what you're dealing with. And a covert narcissist is different than an overt narcissist. The overt narcissist goes around telling everybody how wonderful they are all the time. They're the ones that you think of when you think of a narcissist. They're the ones that are demanding all the space in the room. When they've entered the room, they want the attention. The covert narcissist says, oh no, I don't want attention. It's okay. Everyone else can have the attention. And that's why people don't necessarily think that they're narcissists. They oftentimes act like the victim. They're much more passive aggressive than the overt narcissist. Many people think that they're wonderful. Many people think that they're charming. Most people think that they're the most incredible people on the planet. And that's why you, who are their target, end up feeling very, very victimized, because you don't want to come back out and tell people what you're dealing with, because the things that they do are so small and so subtle that when you go and tell people about it, people go, what are you complaining about? That's really not so bad. It's just the little things add up over time. It's very much of a mind game. It's a constant mind game. So it's constant manipulation, passive aggressive, playing the victim, and it's little tweaks. It's that little kind of tiny things. And so, you kind of have to trust your gut. You notice things over time. You go, you know what? That doesn't seem right. What's going on with that? They're so small that you think, should I speak up about that? Well, if I speak up about that, maybe I'm going to be perceived as being sort of nagging, or if I speak up about that, maybe people will think that I'm being overzealous, or maybe I'm bullying this person who seems so victimized or seems so downtrodden. But you have to go with your gut on this, and you have to take care of yourself. And you're not responsible for another person. And, it is so important for you to trust your gut on this and know what is best for yourself. And no one else is living your life, only you. And boy, does your life go by so fast. I mean, I just recently saw a picture of myself and I was like, wow, that was already 7 years ago. I can't believe how fast 7 years went by. So life goes by so fast. It's like in an instant. And so you cannot worry about what anyone else is going to think or what anyone else is doing. Only you. And people who are your true friends or your true supporters will support you. And you have to know that you are in integrity for yourself and doing what's right for your heart, yourself. And if you can do things that are in integrity at the highest level and for yourself at the highest level, then you just know that that's what you have to do. So if you make that choice, that is for you at the highest level, then that's what you need to do. And just, okay, say to this person, this relationship is not serving me. I want to preserve you. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing, it minimizes potential harm to that person, minimizes potential retaliation if possible, because they are going to want to retaliate. However you try to handle it, they will take it personally, whatever you try to do, because you are a source of supply for them. And they don't want to see their source of supply go out the door, go out the window. And they're going to be worried that you are going to be exposing them to somebody. So no matter how you try to play it, no matter how nice you want it to be, I know for me, I was in a business partnership with a covert narcissist, and I tried very, very hard to have the situation be as amicable as possible. And I've been in a couple of situations with these covert narcissists. And even when they wrong you over and over and over again, as much as you try to keep it smooth, as much as you try to, it's almost like the harder you try to keep it smooth, the worse it is. So you just have to know and trust your gut that the most you can do is stick to your guns, create boundaries, know that the cream always rises to the top. And if you are, staying at the highest level of integrity and knowing that you're making the best decisions that you can for you at the time, and not doing anything wrong on your part, and handling yourself with grace, with positivity, and not smearing the other person to the best of your ability, to the best that you can, without trying to retaliate, but also not being a doormat and just saying, this isn't serving me, but I certainly, wish you well. Don't say anything about them, just saying, I'm choosing to take a different direction, depending on whatever it is that your situation is. Not knowing if it's going to be a business situation or a personal situation. You want to discuss strategies for detaching, disengaging, emotionally preparing yourself for, being in different directions, almost putting an invisible shield around yourself, because they're going to hurl things at you. And you just almost have to just kind of let it go by you, let it whiz by you, start being able to say things like, that's very interesting feedback. Oh, I hear what you're saying. I get that. I get that that's what you think. I agree that that's what you think. Just start to say things like that just is detaching yourself from the situation, where you're just taking a look at them, but you are not engaging. You are not getting involved. You are staying here, you're up here, and they're down here. Definitely as little contact as possible, establishing boundaries. And really, I would take the step of no contact with anybody that they're in contact with too. That is what I did. I cut off everything as far as even social media. I stopped being in contact or relationship with anybody, because I just wanted to cut the cord vibrationally with people who were involved with this person, because, you just don't want that energy. You don't want that power to be sucked from you. You want to be in high vibrational energy, and you want to be able to protect yourself from further manipulation. You want to be able to protect yourself from further emotional harm, from further emotional abuse, from that suck, that energy suck, that feeling, that energy vampire suck that comes from being in that space of a covert narcissist space. And that's what happens when you're in there. And if you want more phrases for disarming narcissists, get my phrases for disarming narcissists at disarmthenarc.com. By the way, disarmthenarc.com. And if you need more support, make sure you join my free private Facebook group, Narcissist Negotiators with Rebecca Zung. And when you're going to heal and move forward, remember it is difficult to recover and heal from being in this sort of counterfeit relationship. So be gentle with yourself. Understand that self-care is going to be ultimate in dealing with that. And I have a whole video on self-care when recovering from narcissists and coping with narcissists. So check out that video. And the impact of having to deal with that, it takes some time to recover from that. It does. You might need therapy when you are dealing with that. So get a good therapist. If you don't have a good therapist, if you don't have access to a good therapist, we have a partnership with BetterHelp. You can go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung to access that. We receive small commissions on that. It doesn't cost you one single penny extra. We just want you to have access to relationships that you can trust. So coping strategies such as breathing techniques, going to yoga, walking around the block, having some friends that you can rely on, all of those things are really, really important. Monitoring your thoughts, really, really important. I always say I never leave my thoughts unsupervised. So listening to good podcasts, listening to good audiobooks, making sure that you are doing your gratitude journals, pivoting your thoughts every single morning, doing things that are going to rebuild your self-esteem, rebuild your self-confidence, make you feel like you can be assertive again, and fostering healthy relationships going forward, making you feel like you are worthy of having healthy relationships going forward. So really, really important. Practice self-compassion, because it's okay, that it may take a little time to move forward. That is completely normal. That is how you can unmask the narcissist and run, but quietly, in dealing with covert narcissists.
You wrote in your book, staying in a relationship with a narcissist just is really and truly not an option. And you listening to us as you're reflecting on everything that Rebecca Zung is sharing with you based on her personal experience, her professional experience, and all of this extensive research, the 40 million views on her YouTube channel. Like, she knows this inside and out. You have this phrase, today is a great day to start negotiating my best life. And if you see yourself reflected in the comments or the stories that Rebecca is talking about, there are things that you say, Rebecca, that you need to stop doing immediately if you want to get out of a narcissistic relationship. What are the things you need to stop doing in order to cut off that supply and get out of there and negotiate for yourself?
Yeah. So step 1, don't run. Step 2, make a U-turn. Step 3, break free. So in the strategy, which is the first step, you have to have these action steps. So in that first action step, step 1, don't run. Stop allowing them to speak to you in a disrespectful manner. I mean, that's the very first step. I know you feel like it's so overwhelming and it's fearful and it's scary and it feels like, oh my God, you're going to have all this backlash. And I know that because you feel like they're going to have that tantrum, right? But that very first boundary that very first baby step can be, I'm not going to allow myself to be spoken to in a way that's disrespectful. That can be your very first step today, because I know you have to course correct. It's like, stop that conditioning, 180-degree turn, right? Stop that conditioning. So first boundary is that start looking at them as if they are a child having a tantrum on the floor. Start putting that invisible shield down around you, and like Superman having, bullets off your chest, or Wonder Woman with the gold bracelets. Remember, they didn't attach themselves to you because you have so little value. They attached themselves to you because you had so much. They devalue you because you have so much value. So remember that. Start looking at them like that. Stop defending yourself. Never explain, justify, or overshare. So, just start looking at them as if they're a third party. Just say, we can discuss this when you have calmed down. Or, I can see that you are upset. I can see that you are angry. Observing their behavior. Let it go by you. Almost like pretend like the words are like looking, whizzing by you. I always say it's sort of like dodgeball. When I was a kid, dodgeball was a big thing, So like I always remember like the words just like they're looking at you, hitting the wall.
So is that, just so I know, because we're going to get a ton of questions, which is, okay, wait, how do I allow myself to not speak? How do I allow myself to hold a boundary and not be disrespected when this person barrages me with texts or yells at me and then I get paralyzed? And you have these essential phrases that you coach people to use to disarm a narcissist and observe the tantrum, acknowledge it, but not let it hit you. Can you share a bunch of those phrases that you coach people to use?
Yes. You can say things like, I agree with you. I agree with you that we're not going to agree. I agree with you that that's your opinion. You can say things like that. I agree with you is always a good one because they kind of hear, I agree with you, but just make sure that you follow it up with, I agree that that's your opinion. If they're saying things like, you're a terrible mother or whatever, you just make sure that I agree that that's your opinion. Your triggers are not my responsibility. You can always say things like that because they often say, it's your fault this or your fault that, something like that. But you can always make sure to remove yourself from a situation where you're not being respected.
I love these phrases. I understand that's how you feel. Your approach is not working for me. Let's discuss this when you're less emotional or angry. Do you have any coaching for the fact that I think most people are afraid to say that because they're then going to invite narcissistic rage?
Mm-hmm.
So when you use one of these phrases to connect with your power and to not allow yourself to be disrespected, I understand that's how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the person raises the stakes and starts raging at you. What would you advise somebody to do that is just starting to practice these boundaries and create boundaries and not run away from the situation?
If they feel like they are going to be in harm's way in some way, then they really may need to remove themselves from this same physical space.
Okay.
There's a saying that says that, if you don't want to be a doormat anymore, get up off the floor. And, you train people, you condition people on how to treat you. And that's, it may sound harsh, but it is the absolute truth. And narcissists are the best ones for that. That's just the truth of the matter.
So if they don't change and somebody's either unwilling or too scared to leave right now, how can you truly negotiate with somebody like that?
Well, you can, because what I teach works.
Rebecca, I just have to say, I love the swagger. Well, you can, because what I teach works, because that makes me believe you. And you're referring to your SLAY method. And SLAY is a 4-part framework that you follow in the courtroom and in life for dealing with, negotiating with, and winning against a narcissist. Can you explain what SLAY stands for?
SLAY stands for strategy, leverage, anticipate, and you.
So let's start with the first one, S. What does it stand for?
S stands for developing a super strong strategy, which is the first part of that is creating a vision. If you're just trying to communicate in general, if you're just trying to figure out what to do with them, if you're in a family situation, if you're just trying to, figure out how to deal with them in life, if it's your neighbor, if it's your tenant, what is it that you want? So many times people are like, I just want them to stop, or I just want peace. That's not a goal. What you want to be specific about what you want. So
Is there a reason why peace can't be a goal? And let's take the example that you either have a mother or a father who is a narcissist. And all you do want is peace. You are not ready to become estranged and to remove them from your life. And you want to figure out a strategy that helps you know what your vision is. How do you figure that out? Because, to your point, you always talk about these 3 C's that you can't change them, you can't control them, and you can't, what's the other one?
you can't cause it, control it, or cure it.
That's right. You can't cause this, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. And so knowing that, how do you create a vision if it's your mother or your father? Like, what questions do you ask yourself?
I still think even if it's your mother or father, you can create a more specific vision around what that relationship should look like for you.
I don't want to
So-
be triggered all the time. I don't want her or his BS to trigger me or make me feel manipulated.
Right. Or even put that in positive terms. Like,
Do I have to?
yeah.
Put it in positive terms. Okay. What does that look like?
Right. So, we will see each other X number of times a year. And during those visits, we will have these kinds of conversations. And, this is how I will define the relationship. And, I think that you should be more specific like that, because
I love that.
yeah, I think that will be, because you get what you envision in life, right? So
I love that. I love that because you're right. I think you're so conditioned when you're dealing with somebody who's narcissistic to think about it from what you're enduring versus what would you actually want. And a lot of times it's like, I'd like to be able to walk into a school function where my ex is and not feel like I've just left my body in a panic attack. I put that in a negative, but that's a very common one that I noticed, is that people dealing with exes and feeling completely enmeshed and triggered and wanting to be able to feel powerful and unaffected anytime I see them.
right. Yeah.
Is that
but-
positive enough?
No, I think it.
Okay.
I mean,
I
I
love
think
you,
it-
Rebecca. Help us.
I think it should be, I want to be able to walk into a school function and sit next to them and be able to discuss our child together and be happy for our child together and celebrate her together and go out for pizza together afterwards and laugh together during the show. Or I think that if you can be like really specific like that it would actually be more beneficial for you.
Beautiful. L stands for leverage. What does that mean?
So leverage is where you're actually creating that motivation for the person to want to be, squeezed and incentivized to want to come to a resolution with you. And in the case of a narcissist, it's going to have to be a situation where that diamond level supply is potentially going to be threatened. Or, there are times where you could potentially, what I call, fluff for favor, vomit later, so where you're
Fluff for favor, vomit later.
yes, where you sort of fluff up their ego in order to get something, give them something they want in order to get something you want. Because
I do this all the time with someone in my life, actually. Now that
Yes.
I'm realizing I have really developed this strategy. I do deploy a strategy. I'm realizing as you're talking to feed a particular person's ego that they are getting their way, that they are the most important person in the room. And I do that as a manipulation strategy so that I can get what I want.
Exactly. just as long as you know that you're only doing it in order to get, what you want. So if you have to go shower or vomit later, then, you do the thing. But, it's in order to get what you want later. So, but more often than not, what you kind of have to do is use your documentation, because they lie so much, because they're so careless, frankly. I mean, they don't think you're ever going to keep track of all the different times that they say things that are, they'll say something in a text message, they'll say something in an email, they'll say, I mean, honestly, they are very irrational. As we talked about at the beginning of this show, how many times their memory is faulty or whatever. But if you keep track, that's how you create your leverage in a negotiation. And you say, hey, you said this, you said this, you said this. I am going to present this in court. I call it ethically manipulating the manipulator. You can call it whatever you want. Many times empaths are uncomfortable with that sort of thing. You have to be on the offensive when you are dealing with a narcissist. It's not doing anything other than what works. I mean, it's not anything that's, unethical at all. But you have to do the things that are offensive. Whereas most empaths are like, I don't want to fight. I just want to resolve this peacefully. Let's just come to a resolution. But if you want to come to a resolution and you want them to stop jerking you around and you want them to leave you alone, this is what you have to do, because they're never going to leave you alone. They're never going to stop. So many people come to me and they say, oh, we're still in court. It's 5 years later. They won't leave me alone. And I say, well, then you haven't figured out what your diamond level supply is yet. You haven't figured out how to, what your leverage is yet.
I bet that part, figuring out your leverage, is the hardest part, because you feel so spun around by the narcissist. So let me just see if I can track with you here. In your 4-part framework for negotiating with a narcissist, it's SLAY. So remember, everybody, S is strategy. You have to have a vision of what you're looking for and that you want to get out of the relationship. And again, you have to have this going in, or you're going to be spun around like a top. And the example that you gave, Rebecca, is my strategy is I'd like to sit next to them in a school function and discuss our child in a civil manner. The next step is L. And L is for leverage. And again, this has to do with that narcissistic supply. They're always going to want to feed their ego. This never ends. You've learned this. And you have to accept that as fact and then use your leverage to give them what they want, even if it makes you vomit later. And you're doing this, you're giving them the supply, the attention, the praise, the this, the that, the weekend trade that they're asking for. You're giving them that, even if it may, I don't want to have to do this. Why? So you can get what you want. And the reason why this is important is because when you supply them with something, what happens? You go into the cycle where they're nice to you. And lots of leverage, by the way, Rebecca is teaching you, comes down to giving them what they want, but also documenting what they say, what they do, and how many times you say something and how many times you do something. And why do you need the documentation, especially if you're in sort of a confrontational kind of thing? And you don't have to be in court for this, by the way. This might be that you constantly argue with your parents about who's hosting the holidays. Keep a record. Keep a record so you have proof. I'm dead serious about this because this comes down to leverage and to supply, right? And this also keeps you from going crazy. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that when you give them something, they're in a good mood, so you can sneak in what you want. See how this works? I love this. So now that we understand the strategy and the leverage, A comes next. And you say, Rebecca, you and I got to be able to be 2 steps ahead. Always. You got to anticipate. Can you teach us what you mean by that?
So A is where you can actually figure out the type of narcissist that you're dealing with, because they will all act a little differently in negotiations. And so a covert narcissist is much more likely to use the flying monkeys and pretend like they're the nice one and I'm the victim and, oh, poor me and all of that. Covert narcissists are going to be the first one if somebody has cancer to show up with the basket and be right at their side in the hospital and, that sort of thing, but smearing everybody on the side, so you just have to be careful of who you're dealing with. And then the anticipation is that also that knowing that they're going to try to bait you. I always say they go fishing, they go, shh, and then they reel you in like this. And then once they have you, you're in the mud and you're down there.
That makes a lot of sense. So what's the final part of the 4-part SLAY framework?
The why, which is you standing in your authentic power, for you on the offensive, and then also your mindset, because 100% of winning is your mindset. And if you don't believe you can win, nobody can help you. And, I have so many people who have said to me, that I can't win or I can't do this or whatever. And I always say to people, do you want to be right about that? Or do you actually want to win? Because you can be right, or you can actually get out of this and win, but you can't have both, right? The good news is that there is a way to deal with them. Most people think that there's not. Most people say you can't negotiate with a narcissist. You can't deal with a narcissist. There's nothing you can do. That it's pointless. It's hopeless. The good news is that there is actually a framework. It is actually pretty simple. They are actually pretty simple to understand. And that once you get on the other side of it and you stand up to them and you grab that power, the freedom that you feel, the feeling that you feel is actually beyond better than anything else. The people who I've helped through my programs are so powerful now. I actually now have master coaches who are becoming, they're graduating from my coaching program now. And it is beyond anything else that's more magical and more powerful than ever. That's the beautiful thing. You and you alone define your value. So just a quick question, could the gaslighting also be not just a way of controlling you or the other person, but also just a way of getting what they want, of justifying what they want? And, I want to be able to do what I want to do. And so I'm going to tell you that we already had this conversation, that you agreed that I could do whatever it is that I want to do. You don't remember having that conversation? Oh, well, I guess you're crazy. I think it's some of that too.
Oh, I think it's definitely a lot of that.
Yeah. So, and do you think that, Brene Brown talks in her book, Daring Greatly, about narcissists and how they're the most wounded of all. They carry the most shame. And so they have the most to cover up for. Do you see that too in your experience?
It's really hard for anyone to diagnose a person with narcissistic personality disorder. And so I tend to lump people in, I don't care what the name is called. If the behaviors are these, then it's not a healthy relationship.
Right.
And on the note of them being wounded, The theories are that narcissists are sort of born out of their own trauma. And if they were raised in an abusive household, then you have a choice of either becoming a narcissist to protect yourself. You're not going to let anyone in. You're going to stop everyone from getting close. And this is following the pattern of how they were abused. The other option when someone has an abusive parent in their life is that they become a codependent, a people pleaser, someone that wants to help everybody and not make any waves. So you've got this push me, pull you kind of a thing. They're takers and we're givers. And so, together we make a perfect match. And that's just the human magnet syndrome, as in Ross Rosenberg's book, is that we are attracted to the drama because we're used to it. And as far as them being able to heal, I don't think that they will ever be able to heal because it is embedded in them. Again, it's a protective mechanism to their own trauma.
Yeah. So how would somebody who wants to divorce a narcissist go about that? What kinds of advice would you give them about, statistics, stories, ways to get out of it?
Well, the first thing is to get support, because you are not about to have a normal divorce. And again, most of the people that come into my groups don't even know they were with a narcissist, don't even know that they've been abused. So when you start a divorce, you're almost innocent at that point. You still have feelings of love and they have none. And then it's so clear in this horrific discard that most of them get to before a divorce that the other person had no feelings. They might have been married for 40 years, but they were just being used. And so when you get into a situation where you're going into a divorce, to prepare yourself by knowing that every trick in the book is going to be used against you. Lies are going to be told. And I think an important thing when you're hearing these in the courtroom, and Susan, you could probably attest to this as well, it's to not react in the judge's eyes. When you're blindsided by lies and accusations in the courtroom, it's to take them offline, take them and understand them, and don't take them as a personal attack, because it's just a ploy. It's a tactic. And while we're sitting there going, how could you not love your children anymore? It's much bigger than that. It's something that without proper preparation for a divorce, you're going to lose in a very big way, because they go for the jugular. There's no question about it. If they punch, they're going to punch harder. And if you're not prepared for that and you're in this innocent, it was a wonderful marriage, I want to keep it together, they're going to walk all over the victims.
Tracy, that just rings a lot of bells with some of the things that Rebecca and I have spoken about, because, as I think Rebecca mentioned just before we started this podcast, not too many narcissists end up in long-term marriages. These are not marriages that are successful. So we have certainly seen our share of divorces, and for relationships that have broken down because of this narcissistic cycle, they go from bad to ugly pretty fast in the courtroom. And I was just thinking, can you share some stories of things that you've heard that narcissists have subjected their, I'll call them victims, to in the courtroom setting or in the divorce setting, that might spark some understanding for our listeners?
Well, a narcissist will actually attack your best qualities. That's just a fact. So if you are a wonderful mother, there's nothing better or that's going to hurt you more than to be accused of being a terrible mother. And so they're going to attack the things that you most value. And so in that, I was attacked in my divorce with very false accusations that I had stolen money, and false accusations that I had forged paperwork. none of this was real. And yet they were the ones actually forging paperwork and, projecting what they were doing. And yet I had to defend myself. I had to protect myself. And so many people will experience you're a terrible parent, and they'll have child protective services called on them when they are the most loving, caring parents. But if you see these things coming in, they are there to distract the judge. They're there to distract and draw out this divorce to be as long as possible. They're doing it for lots of different reasons. One of them is generally financial, that perhaps they have more money and they can rake you over the coals. And a lot of people end up going bankrupt from a $100,000 divorce. So,
making you suffer as part of
that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's what messes with people's heads the most, is that these false accusations, no matter what it is, it hurts.
Right. You get sucked into the trying to defend yourself or trying to rationalize their crazy behavior. And there's no rationalizing crazy.
No.
And you never get to deal with the actual facts of what's best for the children in reality, because you're dealing with the accusations that you're a bad parent or something like that. So,
or that you stole money or whatever it is.
Yeah. So you're so busy dealing with all of that craziness, right, that you never move forward with the actual divorce.
No, it's such a common thing to project out that someone is something that they're not, to accuse them so that they have to defend themselves. And that's the hardest part in going through a divorce with a narcissist. They are the high conflict divorces. They are the ones that don't end. I had 7 trials. I felt like Casey Anthony. I'm like, did I kill my daughter or something? I don't understand why we're fighting over this much. Why?
Right. But I admire you for continuing the fight, though, because, even though it's hell to get out of it, and we talked about, the name of our episode today is Escaping Hell. But you always used to tell my clients, and a lot of times it was the women who were more of the victim, but there's definitely men victims as well. But I would say to them, your choices are really, there's only 3 choices here. It's stay with the person, which as soon as I would say that, they would say, no. Okay, so door number 2 is take your pat on the head and take exactly what they want you to take in the divorce, whatever the parenting plan is, whatever the support is, whatever the property division that they think is, fair to them, which is, basically nothing for you and all for them. Or door number 3 is to fight for what's fair. I mean, those are really the options. And so, I like what you said about, making sure you have the right support, and because it's going to take every ounce of strength you've got.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it can cost that $100,000 that you talked about as well, Tracy. Those are, that fight, even if it's the good fight or the fight based on facts, costs a lot of money in a courtroom.
Yeah. And it's just that sort of mad, rabid dog that just keeps coming back. You just think, why can't this just end? Like, I'm not fighting you. Why does it have to why is something coming out every single time we go to court? And it confuses the victim. It really confuses them, because they truly believe that there was a real marriage and that this shouldn't be happening. So when these things happen, it really messes with their head.
Right, because the goal is not to just pragmatically, settle the divorce. The goal is to make you suffer.
And they'll fight for things that they don't even want. Like kids. This is
all the time.
Huge thing. They don't even want them, but they don't want you to get them. And they're willing to fight again without any reason or any real interest in, but it's just the battle. It's the battle to watch you squirm in courts. And that's their goal. If they can fulfill that, they feel like they've gotten away with something. And when they tip you in court and they tip you in the parental parenting plan, and they get you upset, be really aware that they could be recording you and then using that against you. There's so often where their manipulation of baiting someone is to push you to that point so that you do look crazy. So now they can go around to their next victim and the next victim and tell everyone how crazy you were. So really common.
Yeah, well, you know what it means to heal from being in a toxic situation, toxic relationship. You've been there.
Mhm.
And you're willing to tell your story, and you're willing to talk about what that means, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I feel like that's probably one of the most important things to do for other people that are going through trauma, is to bring that voice forward. You see that with a lot of people where, they don't necessarily recognize the situation they're in. And it only takes somebody providing a voice and telling their story and being able to reflect, because when you're in it, you're immersed in it. You don't necessarily know what pain is or normal is, or what it feels like to be in a healthy dynamic, until you have a sense of you're looking at it from the outside. And sometimes looking at it from the outside can be as simple as hearing a voice from the outside that is not what is normal, healthy, productive, empowering. And it's like when somebody lives their whole life with back pain, that's just their normal. That's their zeroed out, is they just live with this back pain. And until it's healed, only then do they realize the kind of pain that they were in. Similar to static in a room. Somebody could think they're in a quiet room, and then you turn off the static, and then you realize how quiet it actually is. That was similar to my uncoupling from my own intimate relationships and some of the family dynamics and the things that I've been, where there was this kind of narcissistic, almost where they hover an energy vampire, and it's just small little ways that you don't necessarily question. And only after you're on the outside of those dynamics and you have a healthy core, where only then you can realize the contrast that was all around you. And I've got to say that's probably my exact experience with multiple things. Is I was so programmed and so brainwashed in this dynamic that was 360 all around me, with family, with intimacy, with friendships, with business arrangements that I had. It was all over the place. And only after doing the work here did I recognize that toxicity and unhealthy communication styles and blame and dissociation and gaslighting and things like that were all not in the realm of what it feels like, to the point where being in healthy dynamics and in healthy friendships, it almost felt foreign. I was looking around for the other shoe to drop. I was waiting to be victimized again, for somebody to get their hooks in me for the catch. And so, yeah, it's definitely, the healing process was an onion layer for me. You peel back one and you think you've kind of got somewhere, you still got more questions. And then as you learn more, you learn that you have more questions. And then you finally get to that core of who you are. And only then can you recognize what crosses your path. And this doesn't align. This isn't for me. That doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel supportive. That doesn't feel healthy.